Hey, welcome to this new cultural mobility webinar dedicated to the international mobility of disabled artists and cultural professionals, co-funded by the European Union and produced in collaboration with Howlround. My name is Johan Flock. I'm the director of On the Move, the director of operations. For people with visual impairments, I'm a white man in my mid-40s with brown graying hair. I'm wearing glasses. I wear a colorful shirt with a beige sweater. Today, our conversation will focus on equal access to cross-border mobility and its many opportunities that are yet to be achieved for disabled artists and cultural professionals. Thanks to our wonderful moderators and speakers joining us today. This session will therefore allow us to take stock of the situation after the latest initiatives at national, European and international levels, and will continue to propose steps to foster change in this area. Your participation today is very welcome. Throughout the webinar, we kindly ask you to please keep your camera and sound turned off for the entirety of the talk. There is a live transcription in English that you can activate at the bottom of the screen or in a separate link shared in the chat. Please feel free to share questions, comments, insights, resources in the chat during the entire conversation. My colleague Marie Le Sourd, the Secretary General of On the Move, and my other colleague Bernardo Queiroz, our Communications Officer, will convey them, and also we will have the time to exchange at the end of this conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. We invited our dear colleague Jordi Baltà Portolés to facilitate this webinar. Some of you may know Jordi as a consultant, a researcher, and a trainer in cultural policy and international cultural relation. He is an advisor on culture and sustainable cities at the Committee on Culture of United Cities and Local Governments, the UCLG, and a member of the UNESCO Expert Facility for the implementation of the 2005 Convention on the Diversity of Cultural Expressions. Jordi also contributes to the life of many European and international initiatives, and together with John Illingworth and myself, he co-authored the Time to Act studies commissioned by the British Council to On the Move as part of the European Beyond Access project. It is now my pleasure to pass the word to Jordi, who will introduce today's conversation and our guest panelist. Jordi.
Thank you very much, Johan. Thank you very much to On the Move for the invitation, for putting this panel together, and for the opportunity to share today's session with all of you. And I would also like to invite on Sokny, Lisette, Reuter, and Maria Vlachou to turn on their cameras so that we can start the conversation. My name is Jordi Baltà. I'm a white man in my late 40s. I've got dark graying hair and I wear glasses, and today I'm wearing a dark blue top. And I'll be chairing this session today called the International Mobility of Disabled Artists and Culture Professionals, which is part of the On the Move's mobility webinar series. As in the case of other sessions in this series, the aim today is to reflect on the situation of the topic we are addressing today, and particularly the international mobility of disabled artists and culture professionals, some of the challenges that we encounter in this context, but also to explore some of the good practices and try and formulate some recommendations which can later be hopefully put in practice, both by public bodies, but also by international networks and other arts organizations. The focus today is on the international mobility of disabled artists and culture professionals. That, of course, has to do with the importance that international mobility has for all sorts of artists and culture professionals as a core part of their professional development in terms of learning, in terms of broadening of working and learning opportunities, in terms of mutual enrichment, in terms of peer learning. I mean, there's many reasons why international mobility is important. And at the same time, while we reflect on international mobility, we will, of course, also address challenges and opportunities that exist at the domestic or the national level, because they are closely connected. We are using in this webinar the term disabled artists and culture professionals, and we acknowledge, of course, that there's many different terms that are used to refer to the disabled people or to people with disabilities, and that in different contexts there's different ways of addressing this reality. On the Move uses the term disabled artists, and that's consistent with the work that On the Move has done with the Time to Act series of reports that Johan was mentioning earlier. But of course, we acknowledge that in other contexts, there's different terms, and they are perfectly valid. As you will see, our speakers of the panel today might use other terms, both to refer in general to people with disabilities or to artists with disabilities or disabled artists, but also to address the diversity of forms of disability and impairment that exist in this case. And hopefully, in the course of the session, we will be able to see reflect on this diversity of cases. We have a very rich and interesting set of panelists today, and I will briefly introduce them. With us today is Maria Vlachou, who's a founding member and the executive director of Acesso Cultura, an organization based in Portugal. She's the author of several books, including What Have We Got to Do with It? The Political Role of Cultural Organizations and Musing on Culture, Management, Communication, and Our Relationship with People. And she's also the author of the bilingual blog, Musing on Culture. In the past, she was communications director of the São Luís Municipal Theatre and head of communication of the Pavilion of Knowledge, Ciência Viva, in Lisbon. She was a board member of ICOM in Portugal and the editor of its bulletin between 2005 and 2014. And she's collaborated with different programs of the Calouste Gulbenkian Foundation. She's a fellow of the International Society for the Performing Arts, and she's taken part in several international initiatives and training programs. With us today as well is On Sokny, who's the country director for Epic Arts and Obama leader, Epic Arts in Cambodia, and an Obama leader. And she's has over 14 years of experience to advocate for Cambodians with disability. She pioneers inclusion in the arts, empowering marginalized individuals through creative experience. Sokny also serves as an advisor to the Cambodian Ministry of Fine Arts and Culture, where she utilizes arts, inclusive education, community work, and social enterprise to drive positive change. She actively engages with policymakers, promoting inclusive policies that underscore the critical role of culture and art in Cambodia's equitable development. And her passion lies in cultivating leaders committed to serving people with disabilities and advancing social inclusion in their communities. And last but not least is Lisette Reuter, who since 2006 works as project manager, trainer, curator, and consultant in the international inclusive art and cultural sector. She's the founder and executive director of the social enterprise Unlabel, based in Cologne, Germany. As an expert on inclusion, Lisette advises and accompanies cultural stakeholders and organizations throughout Europe in the field of accessibility and equal participation. She's a bridge builder and a border crosser. She's a coach, a project developer, and a master of networks. And her approach is always border crossing in every aspect. She sees inclusion not as a social project, but as a matter of course, and as a normal part of art. So having done this set of presentations, I think it's very much the time to give them the floor. I would ask Maria, Sokny, and Lisette to who, I mean, as you've seen in their profiles, they have an extensive experience in supporting disabled artists at national and an international level, and who also work in very diverse, different contexts. I would like to ask them, first of all, to introduce themselves visually for the audience, but also if they could tell us what are some of the main challenges faced by disabled artists that they identify in the contexts where they are. And this would be the first round. I'll first give the floor to Maria, then Sokny, and then Lisette. And you can start, Maria, when you want.
Thank you, Jordi. Hello, Lisette and Sokny. I'm a white woman in her 50s. I have shoulder high, straight, light brown hair, green eyes. I have a black sweater and white shirt. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you. Acesso Cultura is an association of cultural professionals based in Portugal. And we reached out to the disabled artists with whom we normally collaborate. And the first point I would like to bring up is that one of them told us, great, this is all about mobility, but please think about opportunities for artists who cannot travel. That said, a number of other points we would like to share with you. Really, the first one is it doesn't make a difference if it is a national or international level, it's all the same. And the first one, perhaps the basis of everything, is lack of knowledge of what the specific artists, the specific needs of disabled artists are, lack of knowledge as to what constitutes a barrier, actually, and how we can solve or adapt in order to create access conditions for disabled artists. Then another point that is probably associated to our lack of knowledge is lack of empathy, because when we don't understand certain issues, we tend to think that disabled artists are being difficult or spoiled, and one thing I believe is related to the other. Some other issues that come up is lack of good communication, lack of answers to emails, and that can be particularly stressful for a disabled artist that has to think in advance before traveling on a number of specific conditions. So lack of answer to emails, the contract is not being sent on time, payments are not made in time, and this is actually quite stressful. Then, of course, transport, and whoever has a family member or a colleague with disability knows what it means to travel by plane and the horrible stories that keep coming up. So it is important that these bookings are not left for the last moment, as it often happens, that we consider carefully transfers. And then it's access itself, because many times when we organize something, we think about the main venue of the event, and then we don't think about other venues like the hotel, like public transport in the city where we are, like restaurants, etc. A couple of artists were quite clear about the lack of adequate communication before, when we are organizing everything, either with themselves, the artists, or with their personal assistant. There are issues of lack of access backstage, dressing rooms, toilets, showers, and then also related to our lack of knowledge, schedules, the pauses, the exhaustion, the time a disabled artist might need in order to keep their body in a good condition, and the time it takes many times to do certain things that some artists call creep time. So it's not the same. We cannot plan a residency or a show or a performance without taking into careful consideration the specific needs of disabled artists. So just to conclude, together with the artists that talk to us and our experience, we think it is fundamental to consider training in this field for cultural professionals. And actually the Time to Act report was a trigger for us to create a seminar for producers when working with artists, disabled artists. Then access riders, for instance, we have one in English and one in Portuguese, and they can be, it can be the artist sending their access rider to the organization they're going to work with, or it can be the initiative of the organization when they know they're going to work with a disabled artist to send the access rider, so the artist can give them feedback. And then always to evaluate, ask for feedback after the event has taken place. 2 quick notes. One artist who told us, in Finland, I felt I was seen as a person. And another artist who told us, I've shared all these issues with you, but in Brazil, especially in the big cities, this was not an issue. Access conditions have been taken care of in many cultural organizations in Brazil. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria, for this comprehensive review and for bringing in the voices of many disabled artists and their experience. Sokny, would you like to share some of the challenges that you encounter in your context?
Thank you, Mariam and Jordi, and hello, Lisette, and a whole room here with us, with me. I'm honored to be here with you. I am a woman, Asian woman, brown skin. I have black curly hair, and I'm wearing the red top. And also myself is a woman with disability as well. I'm so honored to be here with everyone here in the room. And for me, it was so surprised to introduce by visual. That is something the first time I haven't experienced, because Cambodia is got such a different way of disability accessibility. So that's a good practice for me to learn online when we introduce ourselves, which is something that I learned from it straight away. And I'm here today also to listen, to learn, but also to be your ally together. And of course, I learned a lot from our panel here, but also it's good to thank you for listening to my issue in Cambodia side as well for disability artists. And I really sharing the same comment like Marian had mentioned already about the challenge. And we face such a quite similar challenging. I was cut right to the 3 or 5 different cut right about the challenges we face in Cambodia, but also international as quite similar. One of those is funding for the arts. It's quite a lack of the funding for the art. If we talk about Cambodia contact, it's we don't have a national funding for the art. We have to find funding from our own projects or our own works or different donors. We have an art, partnership that we work with that provide funding, but it's not kind of specifically to access for people with disability. So we have to put ourselves in mainstream to get there. But sometimes they need quite a lot of access to be able to access to that funding. Other one is a market for artists with disability. The art market is really low here in Cambodia. We're not quite, we don't have a public space for us to go perform or sell tickets or regular performance for generate income. The art space, either we have to rent it out and do it the event, or we have to do our own sale in our own center here. And most likely connected with it, the art space is very inaccessible for us to go perform. So it always add on when we are on a stage, which is kind of, for Cambodia, is kind of great initiative to work it out with the resource we have, but also sometimes it feel like to add on. So it's sometimes not complete design for the accessible for people with disability or artists with disability. Pay scale, that is something that in general, I mean, in Cambodia, artists have to work in different jobs to be able to keep doing what they do. If we talk about artists with disability in Cambodia, what the experience is, the pay scale is quite low. And the artists we work with us here, we cannot, they cannot work at the other place because it's not much access opportunity for the job outside epic artwork. So we fortunate enough to employ our artists for full-time job. But apart from our place, it's quite hard to find another job for artists with disability because the access need and understanding about the arts and culture with disability. The other one is education and knowledge, like Marian had mentioned. The artists that we're working with in general education in disability sector in Cambodia is quite low. People with disability really hard to access to education because of accessibility at school. So the artists that we're working with, most likely they not know how to read or write. So also they don't even know how to do the sign language themselves, who are hearing impairment. So we start from scratch a lot. We have to work with them from very the beginning in terms of access to information, learning their own sign language, but also teaching literacy numbers and stuff like that to be able for them to basic access to information. So the knowledge, artist knowledge, it's quite lack in terms of access to information or get to know more information out there in the world, or even in the country, it's still hard. So we need to support a lot, and we work together, support a lot to share that information to other artists. And art space, like I mentioned already, the markets for the art disability, but also in general art space, there's not such a thing that start to think about accessibility for the art space. So when we work with the public space in Cambodia or the private space in Cambodia, we in the same time we have to advocate for that to be able for us to go and perform, or advocate for the right spot for the sign translator to sign for our deaf dancer. So we have to, in a way, it's a good advocate on as a national and local in general, but we have to put up a lot of prepare and work and make sure our artists don't feel like they're not been thought through about their needs. So we have to work a lot on emotional support and also work a lot on accessibility support for them. And the last one is the other one is quite hard, and that's what we actually fighting for every day is a mindset about people with disability and about artists with disability. In Cambodia, knowledge about disability awareness is quite low. It doesn't mean they doesn't want to understand that, but the education and awareness raising its limits, so the information quite lacks of that. So we have to do a mindset. We have to do a lot of mindset changing or advocate for a mindset change from the negative thought to the positive thinking about artists with disability, especially when down into contemporary dance platform that where our team is. It's quite interesting approach that how the audience in Cambodia take on about the art form, because the contemporary dance also quite a new one as well. And on top of that, we are artists with different disability performance. So it's a lot of top picture challenge on the stage, but it's a good way to put it out there, advocate for talented and the professionalism for artists with disability. The last one is policy, because Cambodia Ministry of Fine Art and Cultures, it's very supportive and very want to bring to make sure that the mainstream the art in Cambodia. But although the policy it started in 2014, it's a long time ago, and a lot of aspects that miss out in terms of integrated with inclusive, disability inclusion or disability art inclusion. Then in the sector of the policy, it wasn't that mentioned that well. So it's still need a lot to do to promote diversity of art in the policy a little bit more in Cambodia. And to sum up, in general, we work out what we have and available resources in Cambodia in terms of artists and diversity in art. we turn around to the place sometime under the tree, we have to put a mat on and perform, or sometimes a lot of stairs, we have to make sure one of our team are ready to carry our artists on top the stair. So we try as much as we could in our lack of resource, but at the same time, we're trying to mainstream our work within the mainstream context of arts and culture, which is kind of good, a good advocate in general that Cambodia kind of start to accept the new dance form in inclusive dance group, and also in the same time they start to talk about the talent of the artists, which I think that's a good advocate that we have a long way to go, but that's how we do it in a smaller resource we have. And for the international level, I think almost the similar situation, but probably in terms of education and access to funding, probably better than Cambodia. That from my understanding. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sokny, for introducing a range of topics ranging from the accessibility at venue level to the broader aspects of social mindsets and how this also translates into policy and funding. We'll now give the floor to Lisette. And Lisette, there's many things that have already been said, but hopefully you have some others to add or just to reinforce some of the things that Sokny and Maria have shared. So the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for the invitation. To introduce myself, I'm a 44-year-old Central European white woman with blonde, curly, long hair going over my shoulders. And today I'm wearing like a roll neck jumper, a black one, and I have blue eyes. And my sign language name, if somebody is also in the audience who's deaf, is like the L of Lisette at the curly hairs. Yeah, a lot of issues already tackled from Maria and Sokny, but I would like to add that I see one of the biggest challenges really like the lack of budget in these traditional cultural funding programs, because the cost for accessibility must then usually be taken from the production budget. And as Unlabel started as a performing arts company, this was really our biggest challenge in the past. Also doing our international big production projects funded by Creative Europe and Erasmus+. And we always faced like a huge problem to get the budget for accessibility costs together. And this leads every company who's working mixed abled inclusive in like a disadvantaged position to every other companies who do not work inclusively, because they have to take the budget from the normal production costs, and there are no additional costs where you can apply for. And it's interesting because in Germany, this is changing a little bit since the last 2 years, I would say. So funding organizations are more aware, but still, for example, in North Rhine-Westphalia, we have the possibility to ask for another 5,000 euros for additional costs, for accessibility costs. If you think about working with deaf artists in a production and you need sign language translators for a 6-week production time, you need 30,000 and not 5,000, you know? So this is really like one of the biggest challenge. And for example, there is finally or hardly no country except UK where you have like this access to work program, which is really wonderful in UK. And the access to work program provides financial support to help individuals and not only employees, because in a lot of countries you have the possibility, if you are employed, to ask for support money, but not for individuals, so not for freelancing artists. And I think this is really one of the biggest challenges. And with this access to work scheme from UK, also freelancing artists, freelancing independent people can ask for support. And they are supporting not only specialized equipment, but they are also supporting travel expenses and support workers. And especially support workers are really needed when you work mixed abled in productions. Another challenge I say is that there's hardly any access to state training opportunities and to educational programs from art universities. And in Germany, for example, just to give you a number, there are only 6 professional trained actors and dancers studied on a state university in the whole country until now. There are, of course, a lot of private initiatives, actor schools where you can be trained, but this state educational system is not accessible. And this leads to another problem, because a lot of state theaters, city theaters, they are only working with professional trained artists from state university programs, you know. So they are saying we would like to have like disabled artists in our ensembles, but there is nobody out there. So I think really one of the main key points is that we have to start with our educational systems. And the situation in Germany is not so different to the most other countries I know in Europe. And I can just confirm what Maria said, and I think this is really the biggest challenge, the lack of knowledge among cultural stakeholders about inclusion, accessibility, not only about the needs of the artist, but also about the needs of the audience. And I think this is really where we also have the best chance to work on all together, because it's about giving training, about giving the possibility to find the knowledge. There is a lot of knowledge out there, but people need to know where to find it, and they need to invest in being trained and educated. So as I'm looking a bit on the time, I think I will make a point here.
Excellent. Thank you very much also, Lisette, for this initial introduction to some of the challenges you see. And as you will have seen over the contributions of Maria, Sokny, and Lisette, there's a wide range of challenges that are observed. I mean, many which have to do with aspects related to information, knowledge, awareness raising, education, with interestingly echo one of the main focus of the Time to Act reports, which were commissioned by the British Council to On the Move in the context of Europe Beyond Access, and which you can access via the information that has been shared in the chat. But also we've encountered many other aspects, and of course many of those can be addressed through information and knowledge. But we've also seen access related to the accessibility of both venues for artistic work, but also the many other infrastructures that are relevant in terms of international mobility, then many other things that are relevant at the domestic or the national level in terms of adapting policies and funding programs and recognizing the specific needs which relate to accessibility, and which mean that, as some of you were saying, potentially artists with disabilities can be particularly disadvantaged when that specificity is not recognized. And then there's broader aspects related to the mindsets and the perception of disabled artists in the minds of people, and to what extent we can change that to a recognition of the value and the right of disabled artists to pursue a career as well, and what that means also in terms of adapting policies and programs. So we've seen a wide range of difficulties and challenges, and now in order to adopt a more constructive role, of course, the participants in the panel today also have solutions, or at least in their own work, they have developed programs and activities that have tried and address some of these challenges. So I would like now to give the floor back to them. We'll start with Sokny now, and ask them if they can share an example of a project or an initiative in which they have been involved and in which some of these challenges have been addressed. So Sokny, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jordi. Thank you. Yes, epic art, we believe in the art as a way of to transform, but also to say the message, spread the message about the issues, social issue we have. So we created in 2006 based on one of the founders who she is a dancer, and also her father also is person with disability from UK. So the art is the soul of the organizations as it whole. So we have 3 programs that are running every day here in the organization. We have the we call it inclusive education program, which is that one of the education under the education program is inclusive art course, because we provide the education for youth with disability from 18 till 35, because it's hard to identify the age of children with disability or the youth with disability. So they join with us a 2-year course to learn different skill in dance, drama, and visual art. We've been running it since 2009, and that is quite intensive course, full-time 2 years, and we provide the accommodation, also the stipend for youth with disability to be able to, for them for living while they have to live with us. But those each generation have been changed a little bit because the job market need as well. We've been running for 5 generations now. The last generation lately we run in 2003. We adapt our curriculum a little bit because the job needed on the market need. So we changed slightly, just dance purely to a dance, the arts and hospitality skill, because we also know that we find out that the youth with disability, when they join with us through the process of selection, after they experience with dance and drama, they also doesn't want to be a dancer. So our job's not force them to be a dancer. Our job to explore and be a bridge for them to explore what they want to be. So the program is tailored based on needed of the youth with disability in the center that we have. So that one of the programs that could produce the new artists to join our dance performance team, that we also have our own group called Epic Arts Dance Company. They are the professional dancer, but also they came from the inclusive art course since 2009 until now. So we generate the new generations each course when they graduate. In this sense, that because when they join with us, there's a lot of needed support within the family, within the access, within the budget, but also at the same time within emotional support. Because the inclusive dance, it's not just only provide them skill, but also the place for them to explore what they want to be, but also explore their potential and build their confidence as well. So some of them, sometimes when they graduate, they got a different job, not being artists, or they become quite a well-known visual art, or they have their own shop created related with their talented. So that what is something we really trying to do for tellers the need of youth with disability who needed support or who want to be explored in arts and the dance, being a dancer. But also to say that, so like I mentioned from the beginning, the contemporary dance in Cambodia quite new. So the trainer, it's actually from UK. That's what we're working with the teacher, the choreographer from UK to work with the artists here. So we're fortunate to have different teachers and choreographer come and work with us in long term, like every 2 years, and then we might have the same teacher or maybe change different, but we find it more effective because the higher proper skill from the teacher from UK than what we find in Cambodia. So our artists who explore and expose with the new different way of contemporary dance with the trainer from the UK. that one of the program we have, but also on our side we have the Epic Art Cafe. I know that's not an artist, but also hospitality is a way that also to create a job for disability who are not interested in art, but they want to work in a restaurant. So that job opportunity creating for people with disability within our organization. And of course, like I mentioned already, the dance team, the company, they are 6 of them, and they have different type of diversity in the group, and they perform in different social issues related with Cambodia. And at the same time, when they perform, they advocate for disability inclusion through the art. So they perform in national and international to different festival, but also the partnership as well. In the country, we work with international school to work with, it's explored with the theme of social inclusion. So that's how a way we advocate wider theme outside the organization work as well through the company. And overall, we promote the percentage of people with disability in organization. We have 54 staff together, probably quite small for compared to other, but 70% of those are people with disability that we're working with. And we play we're trying to be up our game in terms of like being part of different networking of arts networking, general arts and culture networking in Cambodia. They're actually not such a thing specific for disability networking, artists with disability networking in Cambodia. So we not have any other platform apart from just general art networking in Cambodia. So we found it more interested internationally in terms of if we want to explore our opportunity or increase our skill on disability inclusion and art, we're looking for international. In the countries, quite a little bit of lack of opportunity at the moment. So that I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sokny, for sharing your experience. And Lisette, the floor is now yours to share some of your experiences.
Thank you. Yeah, I would like to give you a little insight in our 3-year Access Maker project, which we launched exactly 3 years ago. So we are in the final 2 weeks writing the reports and everything. So what we did, we focused with Access Maker on the support of 3 large city theaters in our region. So Düsseldorfer Schauspielhaus is like a state theater. Theater Dortmund is like huge theater with an opera house inside, children and youth theater. So it's like a 5 Spartenhaus, it's called in Germany. So 5 genres. So really large theaters, and a children and youth theater in Cologne over here. And we focused for 3 years on the inclusive opening process with workshops, seminars, training programs, production supervising. So we really joined their productions and supervised on the artistic process on accessibility and inclusion. And we also offered for every interested cultural actor in Germany free cost telephone advice and online advice, and so-called creative labs, which are 4 days really intensive training courses with international experts. So we invited more than 20 international experts to our creative labs, and we reached out to over 140 participants in these creative labs. We also somehow focused on smaller groups to have like really an intensive training. And I think one of the main points was that we always focused on all areas of culture. So we looked into the program, the audience, the staff, PR and the partners. So we always had like all these different areas of culture in mind and try to make all the areas more accessible and more inclusive. And the idea of the whole project came because of our own experience as a touring performing arts company. Because we were touring on national and international level, and we always encountered the inexperience and the lack of knowledge of the stuff in theaters, especially also of the leaders and heads of big cultural organizations. But we also faced the fact that there was always like a really great willingness to go on this learning journey. And so we always got the feedback. It didn't matter if we performed at the National Opera in Athens or at an opera here in Germany or at a festival in Sweden. We always got the feedback that they learned so much from the work with mixed-abled performing arts group, and that the diversity we brought on stage and we brought in this working environment was really enriching, not only for the audience, but also for the staff in the cultural organization. So, and this was like the basic idea why I created the concept for Access Maker, because I said like, yeah, there is like this huge lack and we have to do something to train the cultural organizations. And if I look now to the numbers of the 3-year project, it's really exciting because the 3 theaters we advised really closely over the 3 years, they created more than 20 performances, which are accessible, and they didn't do it before. 4 of them are created with aesthetic of access, which was a completely new field for the big theaters. And it was really exciting because you have to work artistically completely different. So we reached out with these productions to over more than 35,000 audience members. And we trained more than 1,400 employees from the theaters and other cultural actors in Germany. And we always trained with a tandem team of disabled, either just disabled cultural workers or a tandem team of disabled worker and non-disabled cultural workers. So 80% of our coaches, of our trainers, are cultural workers with disability. So this is also like a big step. And we are facing a lack of good trained cultural workers with disabilities who can train cultural organizations. So what is the next step now for us is to set up a training program for cultural workers with disabilities who are going to be trained to give the advice to the cultural organizations. And so what we also realized that through this big project, Access Maker, we are getting so many requests from all over Germany. So starting from the Goethe institution to the big city theaters to operas, small companies, small individual groups who really starting to work more inclusive, and they all need training. So the request is just so huge that we can't really offer everybody the training courses because we don't just have the resources. And we just had last week our final gathering for this program. And what is really great that we will get much more support from the federal state and from the region and from some sponsors to scale up this project on national level. So, and this is for me like really the step where, yeah, so I think there's a rethinking also in the policy, in the cultural sector of policymakers, that they are now starting to support this kind of projects, and that they see that they need to promote sustainable capacity building projects to or which are able to train people. And this wasn't the situation 3 years ago when we started Access Maker. So it was really hard to find the budget for it. And now everybody is so keen in funding this project, which is nice, of course. And so I really see also a big change among cultural organizations, that they also invest time, that they invest money, that they invest resources, and they really want to initiate a transformation process. And I think the situation is not different in other European countries, but when I look to the dimension of diversity in the cultural sector, people with disability were always coming the last. So there were a lot of programs focusing on migration, LGBTQ, etc., but people with disability were always the last, and this is changing. So I really have the feeling now it's time to start, and a lot of people do have the willingness, and they see the huge need to do something. And maybe to add also on this project, what is nice, so I said already, so the request on training is so huge, and this gives us as a company also the possibility to have another business model as a performing arts company. Because of course we are also gaining some money with our services. So first of all, we can put it back to our artistic programs, but it's also like a security for job opportunities for disabled cultural workers. So, and this is really a nice thing which goes along this project. So I think it's a really sustainable concept. And yeah, it's a great possibility for artists with disability to train others, and also to raise some income of training others. So yeah, I think this is like the example I wanted to share.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Lisette, for sharing your experience and the work you've been doing in recent years. And we'll now give the floor to Maria to share also your own practice.
Thank you. So, as I said in the beginning, we are an association of cultural professionals and cultural organizations. And since the beginning, I think that our core business was training, specifically directed to cultural professionals, and consultancy. I think I share Lisette's view that there's much more awareness at this point. If we consider 10 years ago when the association was created, and the 10 years before that, that we were an informal group working in the field, it's totally different. I wouldn't say though, and Portugal is a small country, that in terms of practice, putting theory into practice, we can have such impressive results. But there's a core group of cultural professionals and cultural organizations that are actually investing on access. In these training programs and consultancy, of course, some of the colleagues that are involved are people with disabilities who are consultants as well. Our most recent program that I think it's worth mentioning, it's called All Areas Access. It's a Creative Europe, it's funded by Creative Europe. I could actually put here the link on our chat. And it involves Portuguese, Italian, and Belgian partners, and we work on making live concerts more accessible to deaf audiences, which is very exciting. It's a whole new world opening up, and of course with deaf performance on stage as well. Apart from that, and yes, we are investing heavily on this. I mean, lack of knowledge, we said it in the beginning, it's probably the cause of the first barriers. It's the basis of the barriers. It's our sector's lack of knowledge. And maybe I could share 3 small episodes with you so that we have an idea of how things then happen in practice. Some years ago, we invited a British colleague from an organization called Attitude is Everything, that they're also working on making live concerts accessible to disabled people in general. It was the first time we saw an access rider. Our colleague, once we invited them, she sent us her access rider, and I remember the first thing on that access rider was, "No one will pick me up." And that was, of course, with us, no one would pick anybody up, but it was very important. And as I said, and I would repeat it now, on our website, you may find a basis in English and in Portuguese of what an access rider can be, and then each artist adapts it to their needs. Recently we had a colleague from Latvia over. She's also a member of our association, and you can't imagine, or maybe you can, how difficult it was to find an accessible hotel. Especially because many hotels, once they are contacted, they will confirm that they're accessible, and they're not. Either because it's not understood what accessibility means, or because they assume that all disabled people have the same needs, and two wheelchair users do not move the same way, do not have the same needs. So it is important also to understand what it means to be accessible. Then we had the chance to visit with her a number of places, a number of cultural venues we have worked with as consultants, so that she could see the kind of work that was undertaken. But again, there were so many others that we could not visit, either because of transport issues or because the venues themselves were not accessible. And then, of course, choosing a restaurant to go out for dinner. It's extremely, I mean, it's such a stressful experience. First of all, to find a restaurant, and then also to find a restaurant with an adapted bathroom, restroom. Sometimes they're one thing, but they're not the other. And then the third experience I would like to share is that a few months ago, we were going to speak in a literary festival. And one of the colleagues invited was a writer who has a condition that is called osteogenesis imperfecta. I think in English it's the brittle bone disease, it's called. Anyway, she's a woman of a low stature. Her members are short, and her bones are quite fragile. We are invited to go on stage, all speakers. The chairs were made of plexiglass, plastic, let's say, and nobody had thought that she would slip because of her clothes also, and the material of the chair. She would slip on that. She couldn't hold herself on that. So in front of everybody and an audience full of young people, her assistant picked her up. I mean, she's an adult woman, picked her up as if she was a baby, and everybody watching and trying to find a solution at that moment. So this is totally avoidable. It's not respectful. It's a total humiliation for many of the disabled artists we work with, and it's avoidable if we use access riders and if we have the curiosity and the openness to treat each person as a person and find out what their specific needs are. On the other hand, a week ago, I think it was a week ago, the Metropolitan Museum organized a debate, which is available online. They have an exhibition called Women Dressing Women, and they organized a debate where Sinead Burke, a British activist, took part. Sinead is a woman of small stature, or she calls herself a little person. And just watching that on that stage before the speakers came in, I saw a small stool in front of one of the chairs. So Sinead got on stage on her own, got on the chair on her own, and had some support for her legs while she was participating in the debate. So that would be my last point here. Each person is a person. There is a basic knowledge we should have. We should look for it. And then, of course, adapt to the specific needs of each person. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. And after listening to all of you, and let's say in the first part of the discussion, we were focusing quite a lot on issues of information and knowledge. And I think by presenting your experiences, what comes up quite clearly is that each in your own context, you very much operate as learning organizations that basically have observed what are the difficulties and what are the challenges, and you've interacted with others. And then on the basis of that, you've really designed activities that respond and are very tailored to that kind of challenges. And that at the same time try and be sustainable, whether it's by fostering the building of capacities, by helping to transform infrastructures, by providing employment opportunities, somehow trying at your own scale to try and address those systemic difficulties. In a few minutes, we'll be opening the floor for questions for the audience, and indeed, as it has been said in the chat, if anyone has questions, do feel free to share them there. But before opening to questions, I would like to share a final question for the speakers, and I'll ask you to try and be brief here. Maybe if you can speak in, say, about 3-4 minutes maximum, that would be ideal. It's now time to try and formulate recommendations or ideas for what should be the next steps. I mean, some of you have already hinted at things that have moved, things that you are advocating for. So thinking of policies and thinking also in terms of networking for organizations like On the Move, what could be the priorities in the near future? I'll first give the floor to Lisette in this time.
I think it's again the same. We have to build up the knowledge also from funding organizations, and this is the basis for everything. And what we did with Unlabeled during the pandemic, we had the chance to set up this project United Inclusion, and the base was built on the report Disability Artists in the Mainstream, a new cultural agenda for Europe, which some of you might know, otherwise it's really good to look it up. And what we did, so we created online seminars with funders from the different levels, so federal, state level, regional, the community level, but also private foundations, private sponsors. And we put them together with cultural workers with disabilities, again, in these online seminars, to be trained by the cultural workers and artists, and to learn about the needs, about accessibility for artists, but also for the audience. And what came out, it was the first time that policymakers and decision makers from big foundations got in dialogue with people with disability. So, and we created a really safe space and a good atmosphere that the decision makers could ask all the questions they always wanted to raise and ask, and it came out. They had no idea about costs, accessibility costs. Most of them didn't know about the cost for a sign language translator by hour, for example. And the result of this project is like a guideline, which is also free of charge. And we created it somehow together with funders. And it's a guideline how you have to change the funding system to become more, so that the funding system is becoming more accessible for artists with disability, but also, of course, for all cultural organizations, and to become more accessible also for the audience. And since this program, we can really see like a change in the design and concept of a lot of funding programs in Germany. So they are thinking now about accessibility costs. So they are including rows in the budget lines, for example, about accessibility costs. And this is like a major change. So, but it's again about creating a space where you can get in dialogue, where they can learn from each other, and where you also can build up trust. I think trust is really important, and we can only reach a huge change if we go on this learning journey together. So we have to learn from each other. And so I think this is the most important for policymakers as well, to listen.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lisette. Maria, your turn.
So yes, I'll try to be brief. Of course, the first thing as a recommendation is invest on training, invest on our lack of knowledge, and try to deal with this issue that is actually basic. Then fund access adaptations, which in most countries would mean comply by the law, nothing else, comply by the law. And then also to link to what Lisette was saying, and the report she mentioned, Disabled Artists in the Mainstream, is quite clear. It's short and clear, is fund the extra costs of disability, know what they are, and fund the extra costs of disability with a dedicated budget. Because otherwise it's up to each company to decide, do I wish to invest on access or not? And then many times they don't wish to take out from other things in order to invest in access. And maybe a last point, because I was remembering our conversation last year when the second part of Time to Act was launched. Let disabled artists work on their art. They are not the consultants. It is very often that our artists go to different places, different venues to do the work, and there's always somebody who says, oh, it's a good thing you're here, let's take a walk around the venue to see if we're okay in terms of access. That's not the artist's job to do. Let them concentrate on their art and look for consultants, disabled, not disabled, look for consultants in what relates to access. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks indeed, Maria, for highlighting these key elements. Sokny, what would be your points?
Thank you. So all good points already. I only have three short points. The first one is about the access funding for artists with disability should be barrier by country. I think that is important, because if you put the country as a barrier, it's gonna be kind of you less behind artists in another country with disabilities and no access to it. And the other one, I think, is the global network. Like today, it's such a great evidence that we come together from different countries, understand each other, talented works, and also challenge. I think that's a greater way to go, that we should come together as a global annual event. I not know what to call, but that's great if you have space to come together to share our strength, weakness, and challenge we face. So then we could learn a lot from each other, at the same time we become as one way. We fight for it. And the last one, I think it's I agree with Maria that it should be a better policy for artists with disability, especially including access costs for artists with disability. That's not, I know it's going to be a long way to go for the country policy here, but it's great to have the international policy, have that, so we can learn from that experience and best practice. I think we'll advocate for that. And now, at the moment, in last message that I have at the moment in Cambodia access, I would just say accessibility is that from the heart at the moment, because that we don't have much in resource, but people surround support it to make it access. That's a Cambodia context from my perspective. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Sokny. And I think we have quite a wide range of elements to work on. Indeed, as it has been said, I mean, the focus on knowledge is something that we also found in the Time to Act report. And one of the points that was made there was there's often a lot of knowledge that is already out there, whether it's in guides, in toolkits, in the knowledge of people that have had the experience. And at the same time, often this is not sufficiently well known. And of course, that's also one of the areas in which international networking, and whether it's at the European level or at broader global level, can make a difference in facilitating a lot of knowledge that is out there, and also through the practice of those projects, also facilitating the addressing of those issues. I don't know if I've been seeing some comments popping up in the chat, and I don't know, Johan or Marie, if there's any questions that you've collected, or if we should give the floor to someone in case.
Yes, I can.
Yeah, Johan.
I can just share that. I mean, thank you already for all the input that you've all shared in the chat. We see many resources have been shared, including by the speakers or on the projects you were mentioning. And I would say that we will probably prepare an info sheet with all the resources and all the links, so that will be published and available on the MOVE website in the coming days, because all the examples are so rich. And this is one thing that comes quite clearly from the conversation. The needle has moved from the Time to Act report and from the many initiatives that were launched years ago. We see that many projects, many initiatives took place, and there is a clear awareness raised in the conversation. In the chat, we had several comments and questions. I'm going to bring one that is echoing what Sokny was mentioning about the international network. The one by Chiara Alborino, who is a contemporary choreographer and dancer, and she was commenting that as a professional based in Italy and co-founder of the Scuola Elementare del Teatro di Napoli, she was working on inclusion issues for disabled artists and workers, and she would like to become a member of cooperation network like this. And she was wondering how an organization or cultural professionals that are committed to advance the conversation and to deliver quite similar initiatives that the one you presented, how do you do that? So I guess it's a question for all of you.
Maybe I can start. So there is the European Disability Arts Cluster out, which is like a huge network from organizations, freelancing, artists, individuals. So a lot of people I see in the Zoom are already in this cluster. And this is a great opportunity for networking, of sharing knowledge, and it's now organized by Europe Beyond Access. And so it's also like in a transformation process at the moment. But I think this is, I would say, on international level, the best network. You can be part of it, and I guess it's not a big problem to send the information also then in the sheet and to become part of it. So we are meeting every, I would say 3 months. Maria, just tell me if I say anything wrong. And so it's really informal, and yeah, it's great. It's really wonderful and really impactful.
Yes, Maria.
I would also add, because Chiara is Italian, to look also for national organizations that can then help also connect to international organizations. And the first one that comes to mind in Italy is Al Di Qua, the association, perhaps the first association created by disabled artists themselves. So that's also a good reference, I think, Chiara.
Wonderful. Thank you for this this advice. I would say that we will also include a link towards a series of resources that exist online, including a database of existing active organizations working already on these issues. We had a couple of other comments, including one from Billy Alvan, who was commenting that we talk, of course, a lot about the accessibility for artists to performance spaces or cultural venues, but we didn't touch a lot on the access issues for audiences. And I guess, I mean, this one is more connected to the very theme of the webinar, that is focusing on the mobility, the international and cross-border mobility of artists and cultural professionals. It is really the focus of this webinar. But of course, and I guess this is something we heard a lot from the speakers, that there is an artificial dimension to focus only on the international trajectory of artists and professionals, as we know that many of the access issues, opportunity available for artists and workers are very much connected to national or local realities, and the infrastructure, but also the structural weaknesses that exist in every context around the globe. So I hope, and I guess, we will be proposing other conversations and other formats also to investigate the access for audiences. And I see Ben Evans being a part of this, our morning conversation, also posting the website of the European Access project. In the Time to Work studies, we spend quite a lot of time actually to reviewing and studying the access issues for disabled audience members. So I guess the Time to Work studies will be also a source of information, but also of conversation to investigate this further. I don't see more questions or comments. I see that some of the participants are posting more resources and links, which I find it fantastic, because it shows that in many countries you have guidance that is available in several languages, which is also something that came up very often in the conversation. Sometimes the guidance or the material, the technical, the writers, etc., are not accessible in several languages. So it's good that we share guidance open to more context. Jordi, do you still have a last word you want to add?
Yeah, I might just add, because one of the comments that has been in the chat from Eva De Breceni, who was saying that she thinks the more we provide accessible programs, the more people with special needs will feel motivated to participate. And she argues that she sees this as a process and believes that it is up to organizations to propose first, and then the artists and audiences will be encouraged to join these initiatives. And she also echoes the feeling, which our speakers have also highlighted, that there is a demand, even if sometimes it's invisible, on behalf of cultural workers and audiences with special needs, but we don't necessarily have the decision in our hands. And then she's wondering how we can encourage organizations to become more accessible and inclusive other than by laws. So what are the other elements that can accelerate or facilitate this change? And I don't know if Sokny, Lisette, or Maria would like to respond to that.
Share with you perhaps that the National Theatre in Lisbon is undergoing works now in order to become more accessible in backstage offices, etc. And it was not only a surprise, it was so exciting to hear the architect that is responsible for that work saying, we are going beyond the law. And that's amazing, because all of us in the field, actually, it doesn't matter what the law says. Once you become aware of how many people you exclude because of the decisions you make every day, because of the way we build the world around us, then we start working on it. And it doesn't matter if it's in the law or not. That's what we want to do. We want to be together. We want to work together. We want to be in performances together. And that, again, I associate, I'm sorry, I think I'm repeating myself, but to knowledge. We need to know, knowledge and awareness. we need to know what the barriers are and work around them. Thank you.
Maybe I can add, so I completely agree with Maria, and we have like the law already out there. So there is like the UN Disability Convention, and in the most countries there are also national laws. So we have the law. What I would like to see is a change in the funding structure, so that if you are working more inclusive, if you are working towards accessibility, that you benefit from more funding, but that you also, for example, are judged by priority. So I think this could make a big change. So there, I see a big responsibility from funding funding companies, state funding programs, that they should judge cultural organizations who are really putting in effort and engagement and accessibility in priority. So this is just my opinion, but this could change a lot. Yeah.
I could jump in quickly as well to add on a little bit on that. I think that one of the things maybe it's difficult to make it work, but you know, the tax on entertainment, it's kind of really hurt the artists who perform, sell a ticket, and then we on top of it have to pay for tax on the ticket and tax on entertainment. Especially when we do like disabled artists who do the show, the income itself, because we not generate money for private business, we generate money for kind of NGO, social enterprise. Tax in terms of tax aspect, it kind of killing the income from the artists with disability who are trying to make a living from the professional. So I know it's gonna be hard, a different country, different policy, but from my perspective, it really take away a lot of, you know, gut from us when we are trying to find money to then generate for the artists, but then we have to pay quite a huge amount of tax as well at the same time. I'm not quite sure that policy gonna be adapt or change, but that one thing might be help for disability artists when they sell a ticket and sell their work. Maybe some way need to considering kind of tax assumptions or a bit more friendly on tax on that. That's my idea. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Just before giving back the floor to Johan, just final word from me. First, to thank On the Move for putting this all together and for disseminating the event and for collecting so many resources on the chat. And as Johan was saying, this will also be the flow, the basis of an info sheet, so that will give us quite a bit of food for learning and for thought. Thanks to everyone for attending the event and for sharing lots of ideas and resources on the chat as well. I was just now seeing the message from Irena from the Balkan Museum Access group, the information that Ben Evans shared about the forthcoming call of European Access, the open call for co-productions coming up next week. I mean, there was also, if you haven't seen, there's a message from Ruben Burgam asking for colleagues active in fine and visual art. So if someone wants to share, you can also reply to his message. And then the thought from Billy Olwen on the potential of just putting an integrated company on stage and how that contributes to transforming audiences and transforming the mindset. So yeah, just a few final thoughts. And yeah, thanks everyone for being here. It's been a pleasure. Lots of good experiences and lots of things to learn, and we'll definitely, hopefully this provides a lot of opportunities for us to continue learning and to improve the practice on the basis of everything that has been shared. So thanks a lot, and Johan, thanks to the speakers, and Johan, now the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jordi. I think what you say is so true. It is very inspiring to see all the initiatives that are taking place and tackling a lot of different issues at the same time. It feels like we are active at targeting different elements of our value chain, and from education to the funding system and the infrastructure, but also working with all these gatekeepers, you know, in charge of cultural institutions and in charge of selecting artists, in charge of supporting them through different opportunities. So it feels like I mean, the takeaways that I have from this conversation is both that we act, of course, towards the policymakers and try to change the frameworks we operate in. But I felt from the conversation we'll all have a responsibility to train ourselves, to open our own minds, and that the cultural players play a big part in changing the mindset and the actual reality of our cultural field. From the conversation also, I see that the training aspect is so important, not only for the soft skill, but also for the hard skills, like the how to, and how we collectively walk the talk. And I like very much this idea that we need to develop further our training abilities, capabilities, and opportunities. So for On the Move, I can say this, that we will continue to advocate for equal access, especially equal access to cross-border mobility for disabled artists and professionals. I think this webinar is just another step in our collective journey to collect examples, to collect messages, but also to channel them and to channel policy recommendations to many stakeholders in our field. In particular, we will be publishing at the end of June a new cultural mobility flows report on this particular topic with the contribution of Jordi Baltà and another colleague, Sophie Doden. And I'm very much looking forward to elaborate on this, to elaborate further, to use all these takeaways from today's conversation and integrate them in our report. I want to thank you, Jordi, but also Lisette, on Sokny, Maria Vlachou, for this conversation, because you brought so many interesting examples and we could measure the progress. I know there's still a lot to do, obviously, but it is also very positive and inspiring to see all the progress that were made these past years. So thank you for everybody, also for your active participation. You know that this webinar will be accessible very soon on our YouTube channel and on Howlround. We would like to post in the chat a very, very quick evaluation form so we can collect your feedback also, not only on the content, but also on the format, and to collect further ideas and recommendations or resources that you might want to share with us. Of course, I can only encourage you to subscribe to On the Move newsletter, to be also aware of not only the mobility opportunities, but also of the future webinars and publication we will do. And I want to thank my colleague Marie Le Sourd and Bernardo Queiroz for contributing so actively to the management of the chat and posting and selecting many resources that appear. So thank you very much. And hopefully we will connect very soon. Thank you.